Hello and welcome to ReverieTrueCrime. I'm your host, Paige. Thank you all for joining me today for the first episode of 2024. I hope everyone has had a great holiday season and will have a really incredible start to the new year. Today officially marks the 4-year anniversary of the podcast. Thank you all so much for your support through the years as the show has evolved. I'm still learning and growing all the time, so thank you for being here and being so supportive. Alright, without further ado, in today's episode we are taking a look into the harrowing and controversial story of the Pladl and Fusco families. As the story unfolds, we will unravel a series of disturbing events marked by abuse, manipulation, and a forbidden relationship. The episode takes a dive into the lives of Steven Pladl, his daughter Katie, and their intertwined destinies that culminate in a shocking series of events, challenging our understanding of family dynamics, moral boundaries, and the consequences of long-hidden secrets. Let's get into this complex story and one of the most perplexing and tragic cases. On April 6, 1975, Grace Pladl gave birth to a little boy that she named Stephen Walter Pladl in Levittown, New York. In the 1980s, junior high and high school in Long Island, New York was rough for Stephen. He was picked on constantly. He was known to be the quiet kid who always stayed to himself and seemed a little strange. Stephen had a temper growing up, and as he got older, he became very abusive. One former classmate of Stephen's who wanted to stay anonymous told ABC 11 News out of Raleigh, North Carolina in 2018, quote, "I remember in high school distinctly, he always wore the same hockey jersey, San Jose Sharks. I mean every day. And we would be in the same gym class. They'd have different grades in the same gym class, and he was the type of kid that he would just never change for gym. At recess, other kids would go out and play whatever. They would stay underneath the overhang and literally just run around this pole. They just stayed right around that area. They never really hung out with any other kids, and, we never knew anything about it, but definitely you could say that it might be strange. People made fun of him, and I felt pretty bad for him because he always seemed like a really quiet kid that, stayed to himself, and if I can look back now with my lens, I would say there was something off." Stephen was 20 years old in 1995 when he met a 15-year-old on the internet named Alyssa Garcia. Alyssa was living in San Antonio, Texas with her parents at the time, but not long after Stephen began grooming Alyssa, she ran away from home to New York into the arms of a 20-year-old who'd manipulated her young mind into thinking she really loved him. And she believed Stephen really loved her too. By the time Alyssa was 16, she was pregnant by Stephen. On January 29, 1998, 17-year-old Alyssa gave birth to their baby girl, Denise Pladl. Stephen was abusive to Alyssa, but she thought when their baby was born, maybe he would change his ways. She soon realized that he would never even attempt to be a better man. Stephen only grew more violent towards her and baby Denise. In an interview with Daily Mail TV, Alyssa said, quote, "He would yell at the baby. He didn't bond with her. He didn't take care of her. He rarely held her. He would do things like cover her mouth when she would cry. He pinched her all over her body and turned her black and blue a couple of times. Eventually, he said he couldn't stand the screaming and crying anymore, so he started to place her into a cooler or an ice chest. Sometimes he would put a blanket there to keep a crack open. Sometimes he would shut it and wouldn't let me go back to open it. He would make me wait a few minutes until I could go back, and I'd open the cooler and she would just be gasping for air, drenched in sweat, bruises all over her. I would just scoop her up and shut the bedroom door so he couldn't bother me, and I would rock her back and forth and tell her how sorry I was for the life she was having." End quote. Alyssa grew more depressed and lived in fear for not only herself but Denise too. She felt she couldn't tell anyone about the abuse that she and her baby were experiencing. Alyssa decided if she possibly couldn't save herself, she had to give her baby a chance to not only survive, but thrive. She gave Denise up for adoption when she was 8 months old. Not long after, Denise was taken in by a sweet, loving couple, Kelly and Anthony Fusco, who changed Denise's name to Katie Rose Fusco. I will refer to her as Katie for the remainder of the episode. As Katie was growing up in a caring and loving environment in Wingdale, New York, Alyssa was stuck in what she called a house of horrors. Steven and Alyssa married in 2006, and in 2007 had another daughter together. Alyssa thought they had grown up and were more ready this time. They eventually settled in Henrico, Virginia. Steven couldn't keep a job, but Alyssa always worked more than one job at a time just to make ends meet. In 2012, they had another baby girl together. Alyssa wanted to escape with her 2 girls, but she said, quote, "He threatened that if I was gone, he would blow his brains out with a gun, figure out a way to record it, and make sure the video got to me." End quote. Steven did own about 5 guns that he legally bought. Their 2 little girls were subjected to a lot of Steven's violence and heated outbursts. They were witnessing their father throw furniture when he was mad, yelling, and punching holes in the walls. Alyssa recalled one violent incident of many when a stray cat found its way into their garage. Steven hated cats. What Alyssa described was horrific. Alyssa said, quote, "He literally beat it to death with his own hands and maybe some tools, wrapped it in a trash bag and put it in the garage, just because he didn't like cats." End quote. Not only did they live in such a cruel environment and see these things happen, they would suffer at the hands of Steven too. Alyssa told of one incident when one of their little girls, who was only 3 years old at the time, wet herself, and Steven lost it. Quote, "He made her wait in the bathtub in her urine-covered clothes for hours until I came home to clean her up. She was shaking and said, 'Can I please come out now, Mommy?' He didn't care that she was up there crying by herself, 3 years old, trembling in a bathtub covered in urine." End quote. The interview Alyssa did with Daily Mail TV was in April of 2018, and she said one of her daughters at that time was 12 years old, and she's on the autism spectrum. Steven would often call her the R word to her face. Alyssa would verbally and physically fight him in an attempt to protect her girls and keep them away from him as best as she could. However, Alyssa said it always haunts her that she couldn't get them away sooner. While all of that was going on with the Pladl family, their biological daughter Katie was living a very good life with Kelly and Anthony. As a teenager attending Dover High School, she was an aspiring artist and loved to draw comic strips. Her plans were to go off to college to chase her dreams of having a career in digital advertising. In 2015, Katie began to get curious about her biological parents and started to contact them through Facebook. At that time, Alyssa and Steven were still together, but had been planning on going their separate ways. Katie and her parents talked back and forth for a while, and in the summer of 2016, Katie decided to meet her biological parents and two sisters, who were ages 6 and 11, for the first time, leaving New York and taking off to see them in Henrico, Virginia. 37-year-old Alyssa was overjoyed. 18 years had gone by, and Alyssa always wanted to know all about Katie. She was blown away by how alike they were after they'd met. Alyssa could not have been happier and more supportive of Katie when she found out Katie wanted to move in with them. Kelly and Anthony Fusco were also very supportive of their daughter's decision. However, Katie wasn't there long before she started spending most of her time with her unemployed biological father, Steven, while Alyssa was working tirelessly every day as a supervisor for T-Mobile. Steven started making changes that Alyssa noticed. He started wearing skinny jeans and tight shirts. He shaved his beard and grew his hair out. Alyssa wasn't sure why his behavior was shifting at the time, but she was a little suspicious. She had a private conversation with Katie about how Steven had abused her as a baby and why she was put up for adoption. But Katie didn't appear to really care, according to Alyssa. In March of 2017, after being separated since November of 2016, Alyssa and Steven finally divorced, and she was able to leave with her two daughters in tow. Although Katie, who was then referring to Alyssa and Steve as mom and dad, didn't want to leave. She and Steven seemed to have really bonded. Steven's choice of sleeping arrangements was a little odd, at least in hindsight, as he wouldn't sleep in his own bed or on the couch. He and Alyssa were sleeping in separate beds at the time, but he began sleeping in Katie's room on the floor beside her bed. Maybe Alyssa thought he was making up for lost time, innocently talking until they both fell asleep. Perhaps she didn't want to automatically assume the worst and accuse him of anything just because he was sleeping on the floor beside his daughter, who maybe he really missed. It could have been completely innocent. Unfortunately, Alyssa would find out there was nothing innocent about it. 2 months later, in May of 2017, Alyssa read in one of her daughter's diaries that Steven and Katie were more than close. They were having an incestuous relationship. Alyssa found out through the diary that Katie was pregnant, and her two daughters were told to refer to Katie as their stepmom and to stop calling her their sister. A part in the diary says, quote, "My dad calls her baby, also his baby. My dad even says that she's my stepmom. WTF, he doesn't even want me to say or call her sister anymore." End quote. The little girl would also refer to her father, Steven, as Satan in some of her writings, and she expressed that she was scared of him. Immediately, Alyssa called Steven, who told her yes, Katie was pregnant, and that it was actually none of Alyssa's business. He told her that if she told anyone about them being together or Katie being pregnant, that he and Katie would leave the state. From there, Alyssa did call the police to tell them everything, and she sought a protective order to keep Steven away from their other two daughters. Both of Alyssa's daughters told authorities that their dad was the father of Katie's baby, and that he even talked about marrying her. The two went on to tell them about Katie moving into Steven's bedroom, and how they could no longer refer to Katie as their sister. They were only to refer to Katie as their stepmom. Also, in the affidavit, one of the girls told authorities that their father told her not to tell anyone because her friends would make fun of her. An investigation began. On July 20th, 2017, Steven and Katie got married in Parkton, Maryland. They were only able to wed because they lied on their marriage papers about being related. The only ones to attend the wedding were Steven's mother, Grace, and Kelly and Anthony Fusco, who reportedly said there was nothing else they could do except be supportive of Katie. On September 1st, 2017, Katie gave birth to her and her biological father's baby, who they named Bennett Carrion Pladl. On January 31st, 2018, warrants for 20-year-old Katie and 42-year-old Steven's arrest were issued in Virginia, and from what I gather, this might be when they went to live in Wake County, North Carolina. Authorities were seeking DNA samples from Steven, Katie, and baby Bennett, who they assumed could be their son. Steven and Katie were taken into custody in North Carolina on charges of incest with adultery, and contributing to delinquency. They were held for extradition on $1 million bond at the Wake County Detention Center in North Carolina. Steven's lawyer's argument was that the two were in a consensual relationship, also stating that Steven was head over heels in love with his daughter, and that had outweighed the issue of them being biologically related. The lawyer also said that Steven was going through issues in his marriage with Alyssa that were also a factor in bringing him and Katie closer together. However, the judge ruled that Steven and Katie were not allowed to contact each other, and baby Bennett was to be in the custody of Steven's mother, Grace. There were no orders that said Steven could not see his son. Henrico, Virginia prosecutor Stacey Davenport said, quote, "We believed them to be out of state, but we didn't know which state. Right now, we're focusing on getting them back here. We are in the process of setting up a date to go get them in North Carolina." End quote. After the two were released on bond, Katie went back to New York to live with Kelly and Anthony, while Steven was extradited back to Virginia. Todd Stone, a legal analyst for CBS 6 in Richmond, Virginia, stated, quote, "This is a pretty unique set of facts, I would say. It's a Class 5 felony if that occurs in Virginia, and that means you can get up to 10 years in prison. A judge will have an opportunity to decide whether this statute makes this conduct illegal because of moral and religious ideas or science and increased chance of birth defects. What should the penalty really be for people who are both adults and consenting to a sexual relationship, even though it's illegal in Virginia and most other places?" End quote. When Katie and Steven were in jail, Alyssa made a public statement saying if a child wants to meet their biological parents, they should be in therapy when they do reunite, because the feelings that might arise could get confused with something else. She also said that she believed Steven manipulated and brainwashed Katie. Katie eventually called Steven after a short time of being in New York and told him that she no longer wanted to be with him. Like most abusers, Steven did not like not having control, so, in his mind, he had to regain it. Taking matters into his own hands, he went down a path of calculated destruction. Despite what we know about Steven, most people were shocked about what happened next. Around 8 p.m. on April 11, 2018, Steven talked his mother into letting him take Bennett home with him that night because he claimed he wanted to make a Skype video call to Katie so she could see Bennett too. Before midnight, Steven called his mother and informed her that he was taking Bennett to New York to visit Katie. At the time, he was still on bond in Henrico County, Virginia, where he had been sent back to for a short while until he moved to Knightdale, North Carolina. Going to New York to see Katie would violate the orders of his bond, which said to not contact her. He spoke to his mother, Grace, again around 7 o'clock the next morning on April 12th. He confirmed that he and 7-month-old Bennett were in New York and were getting close to Katie's location. Not even 2 hours later, at 8:45 a.m., he called his mother again. This time, he had a confession to make. Steven told his mother that he had just murdered Katie and her adoptive father, Anthony Fusco. Bennett was never actually with Steven at all. He admitted that he killed the baby back at his home before he left for New York. Grace Pladl immediately called 911.
Minute 21 seconds.
911, address of the emergency.
Yes. My son just called me, and he told me oh my God, North Carolina, he killed his baby, and he's in the house.
Okay, you said that he told you he killed his baby? Okay, ma'am, listen to me. What's your name? What's your home address?
I'm not there. That's his house.
Okay, what's his address? Tell me exactly what happened.
He's not home. His wife broke up with him over the phone yesterday, and he told me she's in New York, and he told me he was on his way. He called me last night and said he's on his way. He's going to bring the baby to her, and then he was coming back. And he
okay.
He said he killed his wife, he killed her father, and I can't even believe this is happening.
And did this happen in Nightdale?
No. His wife and father are in New York.
Okay, so the incident
actually... He left the baby dead when he left.
When did this happen?
He said he left last night. He called me, I forget, maybe about 7 last night, and said he was on his way to New York. He was going to bring to his wife and give it to her, and then he'd be back. And he called me this morning. I just got off the phone just a couple of minutes ago, and oh God, he told me to call the police, that I shouldn't go over there.
Okay, so so your son is not there?
No, the house is empty. He said he put a key under the front mat, a key to get into the house under the front mat.
Did he say how he did it, or what he did?
And I didn't ask him. I didn't want to know. Oh my God, he's such a wonderful little boy.
Okay, hold on just a second, okay?
Hello?
Okay, I'm still here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get you over to Raleigh Communications, okay? Let me talk first when I call, okay, so I can kind of give them an idea of what was going on, and then I'm going to let you speak with a telecommunicator, okay?
All right.
All right, hold on for me, okay?
Okay.
You still with me?
I'm here.
Hey, this is over in Cary. I have a lady wanting to report a possible homicide.
All right.
And she states that she got a call from her son. Was it this morning?
Yes.
This morning, stating that his wife had split up with him, and she was in New York, and that he killed left him upstairs at the residence.
Just a moment, okay?
So I'm still here, okay?
Okay.
Do you know if he's still at home?
No, he's not.
He's not? Okay.
Okay, Raleigh, I'm going to disconnect.
Okay, thank you, Carrie.
Uh-huh.
On April 12, 2018, Steven had made the 600-mile journey to Wingdale, New York. He stalked Katie and her adoptive father, Anthony, as they hopped into Anthony's truck and left home to go to Waterbury, Connecticut, to Katie's grandmother's house. Katie had planned to clean her grandmother's house that day. When Katie and Anthony were at an intersection in Milford, Connecticut, stopped at a stop sign, Steven saw an opportunity. As he came to a halt in his minivan beside Anthony's truck, Steven aimed his assault rifle, said to be similar to an AR-15, and blasted dozens of bullets into the side of their vehicle. Katie and Anthony had been shot multiple times in their heads and torsos. After Steven called his mother and told her what he did, he went to Dover, New York, where he was later found. He had fatally shot himself in the head in his vehicle. As all of this unfolded, back in Virginia, Alyssa was told about Bennett's death and Steven's. Police went to Steven's home and found 7-month-old Bennett deceased around 9 in the morning, after Grace had called 911. Alyssa went online and typed in self-inflicted gunshot wound, New York. And right away, an article came up with a picture of Katie, Anthony, and a truck full of blood. That's how she found out Katie and her adoptive father were also murdered. A few months later, the autopsy of Bennett showed that he had passed away from asphyxia with compression of his torso. About Steven having guns, Alyssa told the Daily Mail, quote, "He had been interested in guns since he was a young man. I think he may have bought the rifle online. He could have even used my details to purchase it. He used to go to ranges to shoot them. He had taken Katie with him to shoot some of the guns off. When he was arrested, they supposedly had seized his guns, but I told the detectives he was a talented carpenter, and I would not have put it past him to build something to hide them in his home." End quote. Sitting in shock, trying to process all of this information, Alyssa knew that she had the heartbreaking task of telling her daughters that their father, older sister, and baby nephew were no longer alive. She told Daily Mail TV, quote, "When they asked why, I told them that their father had killed them and then killed himself. I've never seen such shock on children's faces before. Just absolute devastation." End quote. Blog posts of Katie's began to surface. She wrote, quote, "A pen and something to draw on became a safe place for me. Ink became my weapon against rules and regulations. To be short, for me, a life without art is no life at all." On April 21st, 2018, just a few days before Alyssa spoke with Daily Mail TV, Katie, Bennett, and Anthony were laid to rest at St. Charles Borromeo Church in Dover Plains, New York. Alyssa did send flowers, but to avoid garnering more attention from the media, she didn't go to the church. She did, however, plan a private vigil for herself and her friends to mourn the loss of her daughter that she said she has now lost 3 times in 3 different ways, and to grieve the loss of her first grandbaby. Anthony Fusco's obituary said he was in the U.S. Coast Guard before he became a correctional officer at Federal Correctional Institution for Danbury, Connecticut for 20 years. When Anthony retired, he still decided to have a part-time job as a security guard. In the obituary, it stated that Tony devoted himself to the people around him, and that he was ripped from the lives of Kelly Fusco and the rest of his family. Katie's obituary talked about her passion of creating beautiful art throughout her life, and how she had goals of making a living using her creative, artsy talents. It went on to say how much she loved all animals with a special fondness for rescuing stray cats. Alyssa stated after the deaths, quote, "It's been a difficult roller coaster of emotions because I'm so devastated by the loss of Katie and her adoptive dad and baby. But it's such a relief that I don't have to look over my shoulder anymore to see if Steve is there. Every single day I've played out in my head, what if he's in the back of my Jeep getting ready to shoot me? Sometimes I had such horrible paranoia that I had to stop whatever I was doing and drive home to make sure everything was okay. If any good can come from the senseless murder of 3 people and the shattered lives left behind, it's that authorities confronted with incest will learn lessons from the infamous Pladl case. I want them to overthink. I want them to err on the side of caution. I want them to err on the side of the protection of the child. If you're talking to someone on the internet, or you're dating someone and it doesn't feel right, they are treating you badly, or you're constantly trying to make sure you don't set them off, that's not normal. It's not healthy. Nobody should have to put up with that. End quote. Alyssa also said that her 2 daughters did not miss Steven. The motive to Alyssa was pretty clear. Quote, all Steve had left was Katie and the baby. The only thing that kept him going was his thought of getting back with her. To find out that he wasn't going to, I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. End quote. This case had a lot of people discussing the very sensitive and complex topic of GSA, or genetic sexual attraction. GSA is a phenomenon where people who are biologically related but have been separated for an extended period experience strong romantic or sexual attraction upon reuniting. This phenomenon has been observed in cases of long-lost siblings, half-siblings, or even parent-child relationships. It's crucial to recognize that GSA is a rare occurrence, but when it does happen, it can lead to complicated ethical and moral dilemmas. If you or someone you know might be experiencing this, it's paramount to seek therapy, both individual and with family. Support groups, online communities, and resources specific to GSA and adoption can provide a sense of belonging and understanding. Education and awareness play a crucial role in dismantling stigmas surrounding these topics. In closing, I wanted to read to you guys Katie's About Me section of her blog. You can go to fuscokatie.weebly.com/about. This will also be in the show notes to check out her portfolio, her written reflection Q&A section, and more. She wrote, as I've always said since people began to ask me why I love art, it's all I've ever known. As a child, I copied my mother's old drawings and would present her with each doodle, sketch, and painting. In my teenage years, it was where I found my voice. I learned to communicate my emotions to a wide audience in a way it would grab attention and keep it, typically through humor and relatable situations. I became nearly famous in my oh-so-densely populated high school of roughly 600 students altogether for my spontaneous little comic strips. A pen and something to draw on became a safe place for me. Ink became my weapon against rules and regulations. There wouldn't be a corner in a classroom or park that didn't have a secret little character living on it. Ask an artist why creating is important to them, and they won't ever stop giving out reasons. To be short, for me, a life without art is no life at all. The number one inspiration to me is emotions, people, animals, even plants. A gentle shove from the wind making a dandelion droop toward the ground makes it seem a little grumpy. A dog laying on its back on a hot summer's day shows contentment. My biggest focus, however, is usually human experiences, although that may just be because I'm around them more often as a fellow human. Expressing beliefs and opinions through a simple cartoon or painting is what I'm mainly interested in. They say writers always look at life as if they were to describe it in full detail a moment later. Well, an artist like myself constantly looks at the world with humor, and in short clips, catching short moments so relatable they almost go unnoticed. The emotions people and things show without even thinking about it, that is my inspiration for much of my work. The pieces I've presented in this portfolio are focused on the growth of women throughout the history of American society. While each work of art seems minimal, they're still very bold with a complex message. Some show improvement for women, and others show our remaining weaknesses. As women, the struggle to fit in, be a lady, appear beautiful, etc., is a struggle we have brought to the attention of the people. Social standards and problems alike are toxic to true peace and harmony, particularly within oneself. Hopefully, through my portfolio, these problems are a reminder to the audience, a small seed that lasts throughout their day. If just one person lets that seed grow into a compliment to a person who needs to hear those words, I will have succeeded in sharing a message too easily forgotten. Creativity means stepping out of your comfort zone into a world full of oil pastels, chalk, and X-Acto knives. An artist walks out of a studio with a used-up eraser under their fingernails and acrylic paint unknowingly swept across the brow. And to me, for an average day in an art studio, that is worthwhile. On the other hand, for a person who cannot confidently present a piece of art unless I have full confidence in the overall neatness, there's only one place I can go for reliable safety: Photoshop. On a screen, colors look much more vivid and strong, and, most importantly, one wrong stroke of a pen doesn't mean dedicating 30 minutes trying to fix it. It wasn't until a little less than a year ago that I became very confident in Photoshop, even with 5 years' experience under my sleeve. If there's any way to leave a program like NYSATA, it would be to do so with confidence. I've been a part of NYSATA since I was 13 years old. After all that time, some words of advice have been passed on to me. Starting at that age, I just collected whatever class projects we did in class and threw it into a folder, ready for a presentation. Later on, I'd get my own original idea for it and immediately do it, a habit I'm still very guilty of. No planning involved. Nowadays, I take about a week to really think out the idea and have an arguably stronger piece than the original one. Sometimes I'll even just start all over again and have a new blank slate or idea. Again, that is from Katie's blog at fuscokatie.weebly.com/about, and you can check the show notes for that to check out more. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode, and until next time, stay safe and take care.